everybody and welcome to this week's video. We have so much going on at the moment that it's hard to keep up. We have 3 weeks left to the end of term. We have Fame coming up. We have another production at the end of term. We have 2 art exhibitions, one of which I've talked about in recent videos. And I've also mentioned the fact we have somebody from the Tate coming because we have a new installation going in. But on top of all the art side, we've also got a lot happening in sports at the moment. Sports Day's next week, and I thought rather than talk about Sports Day, it'd be nice to talk about some of the creative things that happen in the sports department, and therefore I thought it would be good to focus on a particular unit that Lewis from the sports department has been doing, and Lewis is going to talk about it, and it was around Paralympics. So Lewis, just tell us first of all about the idea and then how you went about it and what you did.
Well, I suppose the initial idea for the project was to broaden students' knowledge of different Paralympic sports. A lot of students, because I worked in a school in Japan before, a lot of students, when I introduced a poll to them, had never met anyone that had any type of disability ever. And I'm talking about 60 to 70% of most of my classes. And I just wondered if that was the same when I came back to the UK. So I just wanted to really try and, I suppose, open up the perspectives of students in the school and get them to understand how hard it is for these athletes to train, how hard it is for them to compete, different access, like how do they even get to facilities, the cost of their equipment. It's endless, but these athletes do it because they love sport, and I think it was important to do this unit just to bring everyone together really, and just to realise that, you know, even if you aren't able-bodied and you don't really have the resources that you have, like we do, we use a sports hall, you know, we've got all these things that we get to quite easily. There's a lot of specialist equipment where it's not as easy accessible. So yeah, it was a really fun unit for the grade 8s.
Just before you go on, did you find the same here, that when you talk to students they just hadn't got a sense of that?
A little bit less, yeah, and there was students that had maybe met someone who had a type of disability, whether they were visually impaired or whether they were using a wheelchair. But again, students didn't really know how they participate in sports and how big some of these sports were. Like a lot of students hadn't heard of, you know, blind football because they don't really, I'm not saying all students, but a lot of students haven't really watched the Paralympics as much. Yeah. And a lot of students, to my surprise, haven't watched lots of the just Olympics in general. So yeah, it was really good. Really enjoyed it, and it was nice seeing the students develop in that way.
How did you go about it? I know you've got quite a well-known celebrity to help kick it all off. So
the idea was that students research their own Paralympic sport, and then what they would do is plan a session to teach to younger students. But before they taught the session, they met I like to call him a bit of a London legend because I think he is, but Ade Batan, he started off as a presenter. He then moved into doing various documentaries for the BBC and Channel 4. But yeah, he's a really renowned presenter and presented basically all across the London 2012 games as well. So yeah, it was great to have him in school. He came, he spoke to the students, he brought his basketball wheelchair with him and showed different modifications and how expensive it is. I mean, one of them cost about £4,000, so it was quite shocking for the students to see that. He actually allows students to go into the wheelchair just to see how it moves and the type of force you have to apply and the stability you get. And you know, when you're stretching, obviously it's very different in terms of where your centre of gravity is. So it was interesting for the students to try it out and really experience that. So
even that, they could get an understanding of how that's a completely different sport from basketball as they understand it, that there's modifications that really change it.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, it's great for them. He based off of what you've just said there, he was also showing them the differences in shooting as well, because you shoot more from your chest when you're in a wheelchair instead of, you know, from more shoulder height when you're not. So it was really good for them, and they got to see the differences between the two sports. So yeah, he came in, he gave a lot of context to the students, and then they would use that information and the questions within the session to guide their session with the PYP students.
Yeah, and I actually came over to watch that. It was quite amazing because you had the whole sports hall. A lot of you know we have a new sports hub and it's got a huge sports hall in, so you can have all the grade 8s there, and it was the grade 1s and 4s, wasn't it? Yeah, and then the grade 8s had prepared their different activities and they had the grade 1s and 4s, so just talk through what they did, didn't they?
Yeah, it was really nice. I was lucky to have those two grades come to help us, grades 1 and 4. So they came in, sat down, and basically at that point the grade 8s had already practiced their sport. For example, some of the sports. So one group did curling, which is obviously quite hard to do because we don't have the equipment to do curling, but they modified it in a way by using some long mats, and they had some hurdles at the side to create a barrier, and they were using these little scooter boards that we have to slide along. So these are all changes that the students made to allow the sport to be accessible for anyone. So that was kind of the purpose. They didn't know what grade they would get. They didn't know they'd get a grade 2 group, sorry, a grade 1 group or a grade 4 or whatever, but they had to cater and make sure it was accessible to everyone. So did a really good job. So the kids came, they arrived.
I saw some others. They had visually impaired football, they had curling at the end, they had, what else they had?
Pickleball, so a version of visually impaired pickleball as well. There was seated basketball, also seated volleyball, seated table tennis. And yeah, they were the main sports, I think, and badminton as well. Badminton.
So you had all these sports set up, and then the students running each section depending which sport they did. And then at the end, what's really nice is they did a reflection, didn't they? It's really good.
They got some feedback from the students, which was quite funny. I did ask them to be as honest as possible. So some found some parts boring, some loved it and found it exciting, but that's part of the process, isn't it? I wanted them to be as honest as possible, and they were. So
yeah.
But yeah, I was really proud of the students. The grade 8s did really well. It's not easy to do, and it was their first time teaching, PYP students. So
I have to say, when I watched it, they were totally engaged. They were really engaged. They were really focused on their sport. They were really making sure the students that they were guiding knew what they were doing, and it was really good. So I brought Lewis along just to give you a sense not only of the fact of PE, and we could have talked about the tournaments or sports day, but actually this is just quite a nice little link, because it shows something quite creative and a way of thinking about sports a little differently. So thanks everybody, and I look forward to next week.